Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is Physical Science, Chapter 1 Forces, and we are on 1.4, the magnetic force, Part 4. So please find your Chapter 1 questions. We're going to be working on the questions that go with 1.4 today. And then when you get those opened up, scroll all the way down through 1.2, 1.1, 1.3, that's a long one, 1.4, right there, number 9. And it says, use the graph you constructed for this experiment to answer the following questions. Well, that means I'm going to need to get my graph. So I'm going to go to the 1.4 graph that you previously constructed. You'll want to find your 1.4 graph for the magnetic force lab and open up that Google Sheets document. And then once you're there, you'll want to be following along so it's a little bit easier for you to see on your screen compared to looking at this screen. All right, so let's take a look at the graph. We've got magnetic force in newtons versus distance in millimeters. And on our horizontal axis, we have distance in millimeters. And in our vertical axis, we have magnetic force in newtons. And a question for you is, looking at our horizontal axis, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minor grid lines between 0 and 1. So what is the value of each of these little intervals from 0 to this little line? My second question is, what is the value of each of these minor grid lines between 0 and 1? We have 5 minor grid lines between 0 and 1. So what is the value of each of these little intervals? Now that we have found our graph, let's tackle our questions, starting with number 9a. What do you expect the magnetic force to be at a separation of 4.0 millimeters? And we're going to have our answer to the nearest tenth of a newton. So looking at our graph, it was at 4.0 millimeters. So I go up to 4, and then I find the blue line, and then I go straight over to the nearest tenth of a newton. Then let's look at the next question, B. What do you expect the magnetic force to be at a separation of 9 millimeters? So just doing some guesstimating, as the distance gets bigger, will the force get bigger or smaller? If you said the force will get smaller, you are correct. So looking at 9 exactly, you're going to be going over to the blue line, and you'll want to look very closely and then go straight over and read it to the nearest tenth of a newton. You want to put your answer here and make sure to remember your units in this one and make sure they are to the nearest tenth. And then we'll tackle C. What do you expect the magnetic force to be at a separation of 50 millimeters? And you look at your graph and you say, wait a minute, Mrs. Haugo, my graph only goes to 12. I can't do this problem, it's impossible, give up, shut off the video. No, it's a simple skill called extrapolation. We're going to predict what the graph would be doing. So you see, it's coming down, and then it starts sloping, and it's getting closer and closer and closer to 0. And I'll give you a hint that it does not go negative. So that is your hint for 9C. So you want to put your answer there with units. Then we're going to tackle 9D. What separation is needed between the magnets to provide a magnetic force of 0.4 newtons? If we go to our map, if we go to our graph, we are looking for 0.4 newtons, and we know the value of the interval is 0.2, so 0.2, 0.4, and then we have to follow this grid line all the way over to the blue curve, and we're tempted to stop right at that blue dot, but that's not it, that's above it. We're tempted to stop at the 9, but that's not it, because you can see that it crosses this grid line, the 0.4 grid line, a little bit past 9. So you want to put your answer to the nearest tenth of a millimeter there. And then our final one, what separation is needed between the magnets to provide a magnetic force of 1.8 newtons? Looking at our graph, we know 1.8 would be 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, and then we follow our grid line over to where it hits the blue line, and then we would carefully go down to the nearest tenth of a millimeter and write our answer here. And with that, you have finished the 1.4 questions, and you'll want to resubmit your Chapter 1 book questions into Classroom. All right, thank you. Bye.